being an educator, I find myself frequently depressed about what seems to me to be a change in education. When I went to college, I just went to see what college would have to offer. I would take my classes and get excited about things that I had never heard of before or thought of. And I developed a love of literature, a love of philosophy. There was all this fascinating stuff out there, right? And it wasn't aimed at, how will this get me a job that will get me promoted, that will get me to, right? It closes off the possibility. It doesn't even suggest to people, well, find something you're passionate about and then develop that. Or it doesn't ask you to be kind of self-exploratory. You think you know what you want and you go for it, and then it's not what you want. And that, I think, can create a crisis of meaning. So what I would like is to be able to turn the public discourse around from that and, kind of encourage people to step back and ask questions about what would make my life worth living earlier in the day and approach their opportunities in that spirit.
Honestly, I've gained an appreciation for Woolf after reading.
So is it an appreciation for Woolf or her writing style compared to Williams?
Honestly, both.
Yeah, that's fair. See, okay, here's the thing. Like, I don't know what your experience reading it was, but I started reading it really early this morning. Before I had the reason why I couldn't read the Wolf paper is because I ran like a review session for my undergrad class, which is actually it was actually super fun. Like I already had the teaching bug before that, but like lecturing is kind of a high actually, to like lecture to a room of like 150 undergrads. It's actually very fun. Yeah. So I started reading this like really early this morning, and I was like kind of struggling to read it, to be honest. Like I would read it, but then I would realize that I hadn't understood like what was going on for a few sentences or a paragraph. So I just go back and like reread it. And then I got some like a good Einstein's those breakfast sandwiches, like the sausage and egg on a bagel. Oh, it was so good. So I got one of those and a coffee. And then I was able to so I don't know if that was just me, but after that, I actually did kind of like the reading went easier after that. But but you hated it.
I'll say this. So, I mean, I was kind of like under a time constraint when I read it, which is never good.
That's bad.
But I'll say this is what I did. I read through it once and then I skimmed it.
That's exactly what I did. Yeah.
Let me tell you that skimming it actually like did wonders for the paper.
Yes.
It didn't because I'm sorry to say, I'm actually gonna put this out there. He's a bad writer. And I can point to like sentences that made no sense until upon like a second skim. Like when he was talking about his Anna Karenina.
Karenina, yeah.
Either way, but
okay.
But yeah, it's like the way that he opens that paragraph. We don't have to focus on it because that's not the paper. But it's terrible, right?
It's so bad.
I don't know if that's a place that like stumped you, but like
no, I'm not even kidding. I still don't know. I get the Gauguin like example perfectly. I actually don't know what the dilemma was for Anna Karenina.
It was super weird. I think I get it now, actually, after skimming that section. But it was individual sentences that throw you off because they don't read well. You don't know what the dilemma is. You're like, wait.
Was it something about like suicide?
Yeah. So it was just like, it was a relationship with, Vlasky or whatever his name is.
Yeah.
That she has that I think is, I guess it's like a burden on other characters in the novel.
Okay.
To like a distressing degree. And so like, but she recognizes that fact. So, in the case that Vlasky like commits suicide, there would be some sort of like almost agent regret in that sense, where it's like, even though she's not the one who actually like is she feels intrinsic in some way to the failure
Yeah. Okay.
relationship, even though she wasn't the direct one who committed the
Okay.
act.
Because she like failed to save it, I guess, like the relationship in some sense.
Or she's just so heavily involved in it.
Okay.
At his point that, but either way, dude, that section, like I
I-
couldn't believe how it read at points, because I read the same sentence 5 times, and then I got what he meant, and I'm like, oh, I was like horrified. I was like, how could you write a sentence like that? I was like, once we get to that, I'm gonna point that one out.
Well,
'Cause it was disgusting. I could not believe it.
So just, like, feel free to do that. But like, okay, for my own, like, when we're talking about the text, can we just stick to the Gauguin example? Because I thought that one was amazing, and I didn't get the Anna Karenina one. Like, I just didn't,
that's
honestly.
fine.
Yeah.
Okay,
To be
okay.
completely honest, I'm not even sure what like the point of bringing up the second one was.
No, I honestly agree.
That the second one was just to point out that, like,
Was it a useful foil? Like,
so like the Gauguin one, it's like it all comes down to, if we're talking about like, well, let's just talk about
let's just get in.
So I think, like, if we're gonna say it, like, might as well say like Gauguin. So it's like the French pronunciation.
Gauguin.
Gauguin. And I think it's Gauguin. So like it,
Gauguin.
Nasally enough.
yeah. So like in that case there, it's like, okay, kind of just like hearkening back to like earlier papers we've read. I think, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I was under the impression that the artist had some sort of duty that he was, like, moral duty that he was neglecting, right? In favor of non-moral reasons to pursue, being an artist, which I literally want to
So I'm going to, because remember how, like, I used that, like, the guy as the example in the paper. I'm just going to name him Goga. Yeah, exactly.
You should, because I came across that and I'm like,
I was like, oh, this is just exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, but living below the line of duty.
Exactly. Yeah.
But anyway, like, okay, so the purpose of that one was to talk about, okay, what sort of justification would Gauguin have for kind of failing to fulfill a moral duty in favor of a non-moral duty? So I guess the point was there, it's like, okay, there were, it all kind of, it seemed like it kind of depended on the success or the failure of whether he succeeded in becoming, like, and we don't really care, like, to define succeed, right? Like, but you can define how succeed.
Although
however
he does, there was this, we can circle back to this. There was an interesting section about defining failure, which I thought was interesting.
Yes, exactly.
Can I say, like, at the top here, just because it's I actually never realized this before, because we had read, well, Adam, I know that you and I had read Nagel's paper Moral Luck, and Giffin, that was before your time, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, that's okay. So
we've discussed it, like, several times, so I understand the basic concept.
Which they're actually distinct concepts, and I did a little bit of digging. And okay, I could be totally wrong on this, because it's actually, like, sometimes really difficult to track this down. But if I was, reading an online source correctly, both this paper and Nagel's paper were published in the same journal in 1976. So they were co-published.
In the same year?
Yeah. But so again, I could be wrong about this, because when you look it up, this paper shows it as 1981. But that it's contained within another book by Bernard Williams, and the same goes for Nagel. But I found a source that said that they were both published in the Aristotelian Society for Philosophy or something like that in 1976. Which, so it was just kind of an interesting point there, because, like, they're both developing.
It has to be later. Has to be, because he references Nagel, and he has citations from 1978.
He has citations from 78. Okay, so it has to be 81 then. Okay, so that's odd. I don't know. Like I said, it was actually, like, the online sources that I were finding were very confusing, actually. Because one explicitly said that they were both published in 76 in the same paper. I thought that was so strange. But no, I mean, but I'm happy to believe that, because their conceptions of moral luck are actually importantly different. because Nagel's conception of moral luck is that two people can perform the same action and thus seem like on their face to be the same amount of blameworthiness or praiseworthiness. But you can have radically different results that are not due to anything constitutive about the agent. And so we blame one person way more. And so that's the aspect of moral luck for Nagel. But for Williams, like you were pointing out, Adam, it's the fact that like we have to make these moral choices without knowing whether or not we will succeed in accomplishing the aim that we're sort of like giving up these moral trade-offs for.
Yeah.
In a way that, I actually thought was really interesting.
I found the paper interesting.
I found the content very interesting. Yes.
It was interesting.
Because he's like, because what one of his foils that he sets up is he's kind of like arguing against the idea that like Kant has this he calls I don't know what work this is from, but he calls like the goodwill the like the jewel of like moral philosophy, where he says like, it's like moral evaluation should be made purely on like the goodwill or someone's like intentions. And Williams seems to think, well, like there's a really confounding issue for that, which is namely like his problem of moral luck. And like the example of Gauguin is like I loved that. Do you want to just say the example?
Yeah, so
it's so good actually.
Phrase in your own way.
Yeah. Well, I'm not gonna kind of like get too deep into
don't quote.
But I would rather just kind of get into like the distinction he's trying to make there between like intrinsic luck versus internal luck versus external luck.
Yes. Intrinsic luck versus extrinsic.
I think he says internal and external.
Really?
I have it up. It's intrinsic, and I mean it doesn't matter, but it's intrinsic and extrinsic.
That's what happens when you get a skim. So, but okay. So
can I spell out the case of Gauguin a little bit just to like? Because I think
it's an important one.
Yeah. So basically, like apparently this is a historical example. There was this guy Gauguin, and he was like an aspiring artist, and I guess we can debate the validity of like this, but he thought that he couldn't like properly focus on his art if he stayed with his family. And so he chose to sort of like abandon them essentially, and set off to like, pursue his artistic talents in a way that, so that's like, he's obviously kind of like morally, absconding away from his duty. And so the interesting thing there is that like, Williams points out that there's this like strong intuitive pull to saying that, well, if Gauguin succeeds, then in some sense, like it's not that he's not blameworthy, but it's that like his choice was somehow like deeply understandable or something like that.
Justification is related to it, right?
It's justified. Yeah. And but if he doesn't succeed, if he's just like a worthless painter, then it was an unjustified choice in a way that it's not possible for him to know that like when he's making the choice, which is so interesting actually.
So retrospective is like kind of a key here, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, and I also like the further distinction made, like we just talked about, like the intrinsic versus extrinsic, where we are intrinsic versus extrinsic luck, where it's like, okay, so Gauguin, if he like say he was just a terrible painter and he was like in fact deluded, or maybe not even deluded, let's just say he was a terrible painter. So he goes on, to just fail in that sense. Well, then we kind of look at him like he's like morally blameworthy in a sense, where he just like in such a way that in like an extrinsic luck, like for example, if he were, I don't know, struck by lightning and lost the ability to paint, we wouldn't kind of like hold him with like the same kind of morally blameworthiness, because like it seems like in one sense he was kind of like at the root of the reason why it failed, as opposed to be like kind of like the world just kind of conspired against him in a sense.
Yeah. And we're using the term like moral blameworthiness, but that isn't actually used here very much, is it? I don't think so. I think the framing is, I get what you mean intuitively, but because like he just uses the phrasing.
It's wrong using. Yeah.
I think
justification is what he's thinking about.
And I think Williams I think this was one of the rhetorical aspects that worked in this paper, because he kind of he almost like addresses the moral question obliquely, right? Because he's kind of talking about like just rational justification in the beginning part of the paper, right? Because it's like if you just take morality out of it, like it does still seem like, if you're going to like forego these like very important things in order to try your like luck at something else, then he's right that like it seems justified if it works out, and it seems unjustified if it doesn't. But obviously you're just not in a position to know that either way. And like Adam, what you were saying about like the world conspiring against you, that's like I totally thought about it in those terms too. And there's also something like there's also something that's like epistemically opaque with extrinsic luck, where like you're still left with the sense of like, well, would he have been like a good painter or something, right? Like like we're robbed of the ability to like figure out how it would have worked out.
We don't really know whether he was justified or not.
Exactly, which is like very like not unsatisfying, I guess. Yeah.
But I mean, that's the perspective we're forced to take in reality. So I thought it was like a very practical kind of question,
no, it's
right?
True.
Yeah, very, like that is the world in which we live. So
yeah, no, I totally agree, and it's unlike a lot of other philosophy in that question. Like it matters like what it referencing something we were talking about before.
You don't need to start with like grant perfect knowledge or anything like that, or
No, it's also like, I don't know, did you guys this made me think again, like we keep referencing this, but like it's actually just so pervasive. Like it made me think of the Sartre reading again. Like
I wrote down Sartre.
Yeah, because
I actually wrote down nausea too, specifically earlier. Whenever there's like a contingency is brought up, I'm like, that was the climax of the novel.
He almost
allegedly.
Like there's like a there's like there's a way to read that novel as like a guy who never takes this risk in some sense. Like he just like never does anything. He's always like haunted by that, like what if, or like what if I suffer like from extrinsic fate or whatever, in a way that like, oh, that's actually kind of interesting. Like there's a way in which like cowardice about extrinsic luck can like kind of percolate back and become like kind of intrinsic bad luck that you're like making for yourself, right? Like if you're like, that's almost kind of what cowardice is, right? Like if you're unwilling to take certain risks and like leave it up to extrinsic luck, you've kind of got like the bad constitutive luck of like a weak character.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, based on the way you phrase it there, I think it goes in that direction where it's like intrinsic luck can like influence your view of like extrinsic luck.
Yeah, they're related.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, I feel like you were actually going to say something, Giffin, and then I kind of cut you off like a while back.
Oh, I think I cut you off because I wanted to mention nausea.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So, but like I don't know. This was like a very existentialist reading in a lot of ways too, because it's like that kind of is like that nauseating feeling, right? Where you have to like make choices in the moral domain, but also just like rationally, like just amoral domains of like you have to act like before you know how it's going to turn out.
Yeah, especially because we talk so much about failure in this like work. That I think contributes to it a lot too, right? Because it's not just like you have to make the decision. It's like, well, how you're able to justify it is actually like has a relationship to whether you can or cannot, succeed.
Yes.
So that's more weights on the shoulder.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting actually, because he's sort of, this is on page 24 where he's like beginning to kind of bring in the moral evaluation into the question here, and he's actually kind of like, it strikes me as like true that you can't, there's not actually like, it's inconceivable that you could create a moral rule for accounting for this problem, because like what would that, like, he asked like rhetorically, like what could that rule be? And it's true, like you'd have to have these like really weird particularist exceptions and stuff like that. Like it does strike me that you can't really have a moral rule that avoids this question of
especially at the moment of decision, what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
It's like he kind of like acknowledges that like, yeah, there could be like retrospective ways of viewing like but without knowing how it's going to turn out, like it seems hard to like justify maybe flouting one's moral duty in favor of pursuing some non-moral issue that's not guaranteed to succeed. So
yeah, because he even points out like, because there's like an impulse, I guess you could say like, well, what reasons did you have at the time? And he's like, okay, but still like, but the reasons that you have at the time like aren't like 100% tracking of the outcome. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. So like, he gives like the two examples of like ways to kind of like try to like square it, and then he's like, this one's poor, and then he's like gives another one. It's like this is worse.
What were the two? Is it the utilitarian answer?
No, this is before the utilitarian. This is like the saving clauses. He says, so basically he says like, on the other hand, quote, like if one is convinced that one is a great creative artist, like using that as like kind of a justification, will serve to make obstinacy and fatuous self-delusion conditions of justification. And then he says, while, and then another quotation, if one is reasonably convinced that one is a great creative artist, so like reasonably convinced, is, if anything, worse. So like, so just bringing in like that, what could that rule be? It's like, the first thing you think of like is not going to really actually square it.
Because this also, like the very next two rhetorical questions reminded me of Sartre again, because he's like, what is reasonable conviction supposed to be in such a case? Should Gauguin consult professors of art? And it's like, that made me think of remember in Existentialism as a Humanism, where Sartre was like, choose. Yeah, or he was like, the people you choose to consult, you already know the answer, like when you go to. So it's like
by consulting the artist, you've made a decision.
Exactly. Like you've chosen to trust the artist at that point. So like, and you probably know what they're gonna say. Like, so yeah, and it also fits with that. Like, I don't know. I'm sure you guys have both done this, but like, I'm like, very like hard-headed about some things. Where like, I'll like go to someone like, what do you think about this? They'll like you don't know what you're talking about. I just do it anyway. Do you know what I mean? Like, why? It's like the Sartre point. Like, you already knew what you were gonna do. You just wanted to hear someone like co-sign on it. It's so true. But
a scapegoat later down when it goes awry.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Yes. But and right after that, he says like, because a lot of his foil has been like Kantian like emphasis on the goodwill, but he even says right after that, he says utilitarian formulations don't do anything either, because again, it's like only in aftermath will you be able to like look at it and say, okay, these consequences were better or worse. So like that, as a rule doesn't help you either. And this led directly into something that I thought was kind of interesting, the problem of failure conditions. So on the next page, he says, the utilitarian perspective, not uniquely, but clearly, will miss a very important dimension of such cases, the question of what failure may relatively be. Skipping a sentence, but it matters considerably to the thoughts we are considering in what way the project comes to fail if it fails. If Gauguin sustains some injury on the way to Tahiti, which prevents his ever painting again, that certainly means that his decision, supposing it now to be irreversible, was for nothing. And indeed, there is nothing in the outcome to set against the other people's loss. But that train of events does not provoke the thought in question that after all, he was wrong and unjustified. He does not and never will know whether he was wrong. What would prove him wrong in his project would not just be that it failed, but that he failed. So I guess that's where he's like really introducing that intrinsic versus extrinsic luck. But he continues, yeah. So this distinction shows that while Gauguin's justification is in some ways a matter of luck, it is not equally a matter of all kinds of luck. It matters how intrinsic the cause of failure is to the project itself, which was, I was actually like, whoa, that's actually right. Because I like scribbled down an example somewhere. Where is it? Oh yeah, so this is on page 36. He says, 36. Yeah, on page 36, he says, with an intrinsic failure, the project which generated the decision is revealed as an empty thing, incapable of grounding the agent's life. But with extrinsic failure, it is not so revealed. And while he must acknowledge that it has failed, nonetheless, it has not been discredited. And many, perhaps in the form of some new aspiration, continue to making sense of what's left. Contribute to making sense of what's left. I actually thought like, whoa, that's actually like, that's so right. And I had never noticed it. And I was thinking like, okay, you guys know how like I applied to obviously PhD programs and MA programs, right? And I was thinking, okay, so like there's many ways that I could have not gotten into a PhD program, but like one of two ways is that my writing sample was bad. Right. And that's like an intrinsic failure on my part. But if I didn't get in because I had only like a minor in philosophy on paper, that looks like a lot more like an extrinsic failure. Like it's just bad luck of Pitt's system in a way that like, because the difference there is actually exactly like Williams talks about it, where it's like, okay, if it was an intrinsic failure, that puts the whole project in jeopardy. Right, of like academic philosophy. But if it's an extrinsic failure, what does he say? Like the project can be like reshaped, like
the jury's like, still out.
Yeah, it's so true. Actually, I don't know. Like I've been like making that distinction all along, but in a way that I don't think I had fully realized.
Yeah, this is a good conceptualization once you reread it.
Yeah, and that I don't know, like that kind of made me think about. I don't know. There's pros and cons to each, but like, okay, like when you guys fail, I mean, if you have to fail at something, like which way do you prefer to fail? Because it's like, well, I'll shut up and let you answer because I have mixed feelings about this.
I have really mixed feelings as well. I mean, like the first in my mind was like, I mean, you guys both know about this one. Last year, like I was running in the fall, like consistently, I would say 3 times a week. And I was like getting in pretty good mile time running shape. Well, what happened? Well, I got into a car accident.
Yeah.
Right? Like where I was in the passenger seat, which caused me lower back pain such that I couldn't work out for 3 months, which completely derailed the goal.
Went to shit, yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's just like, which was just infuriating.
Yes.
In such a way that like, intrinsic failure might not have been.
Yes.
Like,
No, I know.
I was gonna say there's like the uncertainty associated with the extrinsic failure, like
it's horrible.
that can be like suffering. Like even if it's intrinsic failure, like like you're gonna have to like bite that bullet of like this reflects on you, but at least like you won't be like wondering, right? You just kind of have to like you can move forward from that. Or if it's extrinsic, you're still have to like juggle that, like, okay, the project can still be saved, but I still don't know that it's like a worthy project. I simply like don't know anything.
It's also like Like imagine it's actually such a good example. Like imagine you're the quarterback of like an NFL team and you put your team in a position to win. Like, okay, there's 4 minutes left. You drive down the field and throw a touchdown pass, right? Now you're up by 2 points. But then the defense just allows like the other team to kick, like advance like field position and kick a field goal with no time left, right? So it's like that's an instance where it would feel good to have like failure be due to extrinsic, because you could say like I left it out on the field, like I did my part or whatever, and so you don't have to kind of like blame yourself. But like at the same time, but there are other circumstances in which like extrinsic like bad luck infuriates me. Like it would be so much worse.
Yeah, and like Williams, pretty much explicitly says this later on in the paper, but he talks about like, okay, like what is there to be learned from like extrinsic?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's like in some cases there may be nothing to learn.
That's what I was
where like because it's just like
something fell apart and you're sitting there with uncertainty still.
So I like in the case of like maybe the running example isn't as good because I could have done something, but there are other examples in my life where I've experienced like extrinsic failure, and it's just like what was there to learn from
you
this?
Just feel it's like the perfect word for that is just like snake bitten. It's just like it's just like a very sour feeling. Like
I would have I'm kind of just hearkening to some of the language that Williams uses, like you may still have like deliberated in the same manner again.
Yes.
Like if you actually endorse the deliberation that went into like action, but it just turned out poorly. So it's like, okay, what's there to be learned from this? Like
you get the opportunity to redeliberate with no further knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and this actually like directly goes on to another part of the debate that I thought was interesting, like whether regret is cumulative in that sense, because like I think he like put up his foil, like Rawls says that it shouldn't be, because he just wants to treat like each individual decision as its like own like statistically independent variable. Like you shouldn't allow yourself to become like more risk averse or whatever because you've gotten like burned in the past. But it's like, I don't know, I thought Williams was just dead right about that. Like, well, no, but like when you're making a subsequent decision, it's not the same you that had deliberated like in the first place. Do you know what I mean? So it's just like, like you have more information now in the sense that like maybe you understand, okay, like if I get burned in these certain ways, like that's way worse than I thought, like before I made this one like probabilistic decision or you know what I mean? Like I really sided with Williams on that.
No, I think that's completely fair. It gives you like the future, version of you will have like all kind of new material, even if like we've talked about before, there's like might be uncertainty left, like the burn, how the burn feels, like the opportunity cost can be reassessed, like all kinds of things can contribute to a new perspective.
No, it's true.
And then I think we should also bring up the distinction that he makes between just like regret and like agent regret.
So that's on 27. He says so when he's talking about regret, he says a notion we shall be bound to use in describing their state of mind as regret. And there are certain things that need first to be said about this notion. The constitutive thought of regret in general is something like, quote, how much better if it had been otherwise. And the feeling can in principle apply to anything of which one can form some conception of how it might have been otherwise, together with consciousness of how things then would have been better. So this was, well, I'll just continue. But then he differentiates that from agent regret, and he says, but there's a particularly important species of regret, which I shall call agent regret, which a person can feel only towards his past actions. or at most actions in which he regards himself as a participant, right? So I guess he's making this distinction between like you can regret how things went versus regretting that you did things in a particular way.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was I really appreciate that distinction.
Yeah, it's true.
Because like I can like I found myself doing this in the past, but it just it's one of those things that really benefits from having it laid out on a page in front of you.
It's also reminded me of the this also reminded me of our discussion remember around the shame of missing your father's funeral, Giffin, of like the example that we were using.
Ringing a bell.
Yeah, because that was an instance where like because regret you can sort of take with an objective attitude, but like agent regret seems to be more from the reactive stance, in the sense that like you can sort of regret that things happened in a certain way, but to truly regret that like you played a certain role in something seems to be more like self-reactive. I don't know, that's kind of how I was reading the difference there. Because it's
so
like
it's treating yourself with the
no self-reactive. Yeah, self-reactive, because it's like, because if you regret like if you're expressing regret over like how things went, there's really just kind of like an objective stance towards that, where it's like, it's kind of a shame that things went like that, like I wish they hadn't, right? But like if you were not the central role in how things went, it's hard to really like bring in blame in that. Like I guess you could blame other people, but like you're kind of viewing the situation as like kind of just a shame in some sense, right? But if you're feeling regret about your own past actions, like obviously, you know, metaphysically this is kind of a facade, but like because you couldn't have done otherwise, obviously. But but it's like I don't know, like I do feel differently actually about like things that I could have had, you know, like local control over, versus things that were just like really shitty that just happened. Right?
Yeah. So this was a useful decision on his part to kind of like pull apart the different ways in which we use a regret. So no, I think that's fair. I felt the same way.
And it's like agent regret doesn't just deal with, you know, like regret of one's behavior or like actions, because like there's like a further distinction that he makes where it's like you could merely just feel regret about behavior that you kind of did, if you actually like let me think of how to phrase this here.
We can pull like what he says at the bottom of the 27.
But just like if you endorse like the rational like deliberation that went into like the behavior, you can regret that things happened or that you did certain things in a situation, but there isn't that same agent regret where it's like in a sense that you wish you would act differently, or you do. It's like a weird distinction, but do you guys know what I mean? Where it's like you wish you would have acted differently, but not in the same way of agent regret, because you still endorse the deliberative.
At the time, right? Because it's like you can justify it in like looking back, but you like wish for like almost consequentialist reasons that, you know, you maybe had done something differently, right?
Yeah.
So that kind of like distinction. Yeah.
No, it's true. Where it's like, I mean, I experience both sides of this coin all the time, where like if you just like bungle something and then you look back and you're like, well, I mean, I couldn't have known that. It's not as deep of a regret, at least for me, as when you look back and you're like, you moron. Like, how could you have thought, you know what I mean? Like, how could you have actually thought that this was the right move to make?
Yeah, or something like this, like where it's like say Giffin in the lab, like if he sends out like, I don't know, like a text to everybody in the lab saying like, hey, I'm going to be moving like this fairly heavy piece of machinery that's like going to obscure my vision.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And like he's just like, so please do not occupy the hallways during this time. Like, I'm going to be moving this piece.
Yes, yeah.
And then you push it out there and you come into like almost like a crossroads where it's like, this cut's probably shorter, but you take a right and then you like kill somebody. You know what I mean?
This is like it's like the lorry driver example.
but like in this sense here, like
it's true that, but he gave forewarning.
I'm sure like Giffin would feel like agent regret at first, like, you know what I mean, where it would just be like what have I done? But I feel like, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, Giffin, but I feel like within like I don't care like the time length, but you could be transitioned over to just regret of the situation and of what happened, given that, I mean, you weren't like so deep as you weren't like intrinsically the cause.
You weren't like wrong in your reasoning there.
Yeah.
No, I think that's fair. I think time would kind of transition that a bit. Right.
What if you just broke their leg? Like, how about just breaking their leg? Yeah. How fast could you switch that mindset to being like, I mean, I really do think this has happened, but
and actually, like, it's you make a quick change too. If you actually like deeply believe that you had been deliberatively correct, sometimes you can immediately pivot to anger.
Too. Yeah, I was gonna say, it really depends on the situation there.
Yeah, like
some indignant like moron just like, what are you doing? It's like,
yes, you can immediately.
There is no switch. Like, you immediately.
It's true, and that seems to me to be tracking that you believe that you were in the deliberatively correct position there. Yeah, because like because I would imagine that if you hadn't sent out that forewarning, you just like fuck it, we're just gonna move this now. And you just smash this guy's leg against the wall. It'd be like very unreasonable for you to then become angry at him.
Yeah, pretty big difference there.
Yeah, and in terms of the deliberative difference. Did I feel like I've mentioned this to you guys, but this paper made me think about it again. So he talks about like, I mean, it's basically just the same instance of the lorry driver where like he backs over someone's kid, but like by accident and without fault. So he had like he checked all of his mirrors, he like the backup sound was on, like everything he could possibly do, but just somehow like some kid just ran out and just like, he backed over him, for instance. And like William says that, okay, like on the one hand, it's completely irrational to feel agent regret because you can't locate a mistake deliberatively anywhere in like what you've done. But then he says, but equally, it would be a kind of insanity never to experience sentiments of this kind towards anyone. And it would be an insane concept of rationality, which insisted that a rational person never would. So he's pointing to this weird tension here. Did I ever tell you guys about this social psych study that actually looked at this in real life by David Pizarro from Cornell? They did this. It's examining, I don't remember what the title of it was, but it's something about like false positives and character evaluation.
That sounds familiar, actually. But go on.
So it's a really cool study actually where I don't remember the details of the manipulation, but basically they found that when something, I think coffee was spilled on someone in the experiment, right? And like it was no fault of the person who had spilled the coffee, but like if the person expressed like agent regret over it, even though it was not their fault, like they couldn't, it wasn't like there was no deliberative failing on their part.
Yeah,
people rated them as like having a better character than people who instantly just so like they're I think that the person who had the coffee spilled on them and the spiller of the coffee were both actors in the study, and then there was someone evaluating them, right?
I remember this exact study. You mentioned this before.
It's like one of my favorite studies of all time, because the person who gets the coffee spilled on them says like, oh no, like you couldn't have, like it's not you didn't do anything wrong. And then like they manipulated whether the person immediately just accepts that. And you're like, you're right. Like I couldn't have actually. And people,
agreed.
Yeah. And like people just
walks away.
Like sim characters.
How logical.
Yeah.
But no, at the same time, it's like, and I don't remember if this was a manipulation in the study or if this was just kind of thinking about it after the fact, but it would also strike you as like insane, both if you had no agent regret, but also too much agent regret, right? Like, what if you would just like, no, like you weren't even like involved in the spilling?
I killed him.
yeah, exactly. Like that would also seem unhinged.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. What I was thinking about before you even mentioned this example, but I think it clarifies it even, is I think like our perceptions of like people's responses like that has to do with like what Adam was describing, like when he was asking me about like the transition. Like it's if you like, there has to be a process where you're deliberating about whether you could have done differently, right?
Yeah,
and if you immediately are like, you know, in Jordan, your example, like, yes, I could have done differently, you know, I take no blame at all. That suggests like that you actually didn't deliberate on whether like, you know, your actions like were still justified at all. I think that.
Wait. You were saying if you could have done differently, but you took no blame.
I'm sorry. Let me rephrase.
Oh, I was like that response seems extremely strange.
Sorry, I misspoke.
Okay.
Mentioned a little tired.
I think I've already misspoke. Severance, like
severance times.
Severance times.
Yeah. So
I thought that I misheard because I'm tired too. So I was like, "Am I being a dullard right now?" As he
listen, I said moral blameworthy earlier, so I conflated 3 different philosophy topics in a single paper, a single sentence there. So
yeah,
that was painful.
But I'll try this again. So if you're like in the situation and like the other person's like, so we're having a discussion about like how to justify your past behaviors, right? In terms of like,
yes,
in regrets, like the relationship between like a justification and regret. I feel like what could be explained in that study is like you expect other people to actually go through a process where they deliberate whether their like decisions were justified, you know, at the time.
Oh, okay.
So the fact that like if it's like immediately where you're like, you know what? Yeah, you're right. I would have done the same thing. Like I endorse my behavior. It's like,
yeah.
Are you just a dick, or did you actually like?
No, it's true. Right? Yeah,
I think that's kind of like the relationship because Adam mentioned the transition, and that had me thinking about that.
That makes sense. That makes sense to me because what Williams intimates that agent regret only occurs in the unsuccessful attempts, right? So like when Gauguin fails at being an artist, right? Like there's only because he doesn't have agent regret when he succeeds, right? What Williams says that. I don't remember. I think it's on 30. Yeah, because he says, okay, so but Gauguin, as we have represented him, wishes he had acted otherwise only if he was unsuccessful. And he continues on the next page and he says, whatever feelings these agents had after their decision, but before the declaration of their success or failure, lacked the fully developed wish to have acted otherwise. That wish comes only when failure is declared. Regret necessarily involves a wish that things had been otherwise, but it does not necessarily involve the wish, all things considered taken together, that one had acted otherwise. That's interesting. Okay, so when he's like, what's he talking about when he says whatever feelings these agents had after their decision, but before the declaration of their success or failure, lacked the fully developed wish to have acted other. So he's just like, saying like
he's becoming an artist or on the path.
He's like on the ship to Greece or whatever.
yeah, on his way to Tahiti.
Yeah, that's actually well. I don't know if I believe that. Couldn't you? I don't know, actually. I could imagine, so like you abandon your family to pursue art and you're like on the ship to wherever you're going to do that. I don't know. Couldn't you actually have agent regret before you have success or failure? I don't know. Couldn't you be like, couldn't you have a change of mind on the ship where you think like, actually, regardless of whether I succeed or not, this was like the wrong thing to do?
I think that might be a little outside of the example.
Okay,
I think we're supposed to be grand.
Yeah.
We're supposed to be granting that like he is on the path.
So we're supposed
he's in attempting to succeed still.
Right. Okay. Oh no, you're right. I had misread that. And also, like, I think we were supposed to be thinking about, well, he only would have regretted it if he failed.
Right.
Exactly. That's exactly
okay.
Because he made a decision and is on the path.
Okay. That makes total sense to me at this point.
I just want to bring up one little thing. We don't have to dwell on this, but you had read that one sentence. I just want to read it again just to remind it. But what degree of such feeling is appropriate, and what attempts at reparative action or substitutes it before it are questions for particular cases. Actually, let me.
I'm sorry. What page is this?
This is on page 29.
Oh, I thought we were on 30. Okay.
Yeah, let me get to the actual part that I want to get to here. Okay. But equally, it would be a kind of insanity never to experience sentiments of this kind towards anyone. And it would be an insane concept of rationality, which insisted that a rational person never would. I don't know about that. So
you're questioning the latter part of that?
I'm questioning the latter part of that.
Yeah,
so, because I think any individual that, you know, in the numerous cases we've already mentioned, that perhaps it wasn't rationally appropriate for them to experience, you know, agent regret, it would still be appropriate from like a human perspective for them to experience agent regret. I just wonder though, like in a concept of rationality, I'm not sure it's actually rational to experience. I know it's intrinsic human, but I'm not sure it's rational. Because
on what basis would you rationally locate it? Like almost like by definition, like if you truly had in grasp all of the relevant reasons and you evaluated those reasons correctly, and it's still just by roll of the dice, like you can't, like, on, you know, like what are you gonna you
could even regret that you did what you did, but you can't regret like in an agent regret sort of way where it's just like you know, I am deeply at the cause of what happened here, where it's like not exactly.
And so, you can't, I almost like wonder if it like descriptively it is a very human response, like, but you're almost making me question like the normative response to it as well, because it's like, okay, in instances where you didn't deliberate well, it totally makes sense because you actually did something wrong. But but if you actually took every precaution you could, and
I agree with that,
you understood the odds, like I don't know, like I because, like, you know, grant that like most cases won't be like this, right? But for the cases that are, like, because I'm not saying you shouldn't experience regret, but agent regret,
I mean like there's this is similar to the other examples, but if you're just like racing down the highway and someone just leaps out in front of the car at that point, it's like, I mean, you could be very regretful of the situation, but I'm not sure how appropriate agent regret is there. Probably not whatsoever. You know what I mean?
Dude, so, I think about I've literally had this thought like 1,000 times where, like, if you were just driving within the speed limit, you were not distracted, you weren't texting, you weren't drunk, anything, and someone just chose to like you know, take their own lives, but by way of your car in that moment, like. And there's nothing, like, you know, you're going 60 on a 60-mile-an-hour highway, and like you can't swerve because you just can't, like, there's a family right next to you, like there's literally nothing you can do. So like, is it actually, like, should you actually feel like agent regret? No, honestly, like,
so even
granting that you know that, right?
That's
what we're talking
exactly
about. I made that same note. I was like, with 100% confidence, even.
Exactly. So we could totally imagine the scenario you just gave right there, where like you were like all your faculties are just like to the road. you're just like I don't know if you guys.
It's the most focused you've ever been
on any task.
Exactly, like, and I've had moments like that on the road too, where it's just like, okay, this is like an especially, you know, kind of maybe clustered traffic, or it just seems like a more dangerous area, so you're just kind of focused on the road right then and there.
Adam driving away from the police, hyper focused.
But then just leaps right in front of there. It's just like it's like, okay, well, I'm not sure that's rational.
No,
Yeah,
like it is.
And even something that you should feel, like even just as a human, you know what I mean? Like I'm not sure. Yeah. I'm not actually sure that has any basis. Yeah.
This relates back to what I was talking about before with like the kind of transition. It's like all of that relates back to like uncertainty. Like you expect to like go through the process of figuring it out. But if you immediately grant like the knowledge, it's like, okay, well that's way different, right?
Yeah.
Good
and it's
point,
just
Giffin,
like,
good point.
Yeah, I totally agree. And this even happens like, I feel like this even gets kind of sectioned out like within the same decision where like you can think back on like, I don't know, like I've definitely done this before. Like you think back on some like rough experience or whatever, and you're just like, well, I did this aspect and this aspect, like there's nothing that I could have done better, right? But for this aspect, like my temper got a hold of me a little bit too much here or whatever, right? So there's like, I think that can be the case even within like the same circumstance. And yeah, just like experientially speaking, like that I actually don't feel agent regret over the things that I truly believed like I did well, like as well as I could have. You know what I mean? Like I just don't.
And the thing is, I think
that seems absurd.
Like he acknowledges like that's fine. Like, you know what I mean? Where saying like there's something, where we would find it, perhaps disturbing of an individual to quite quickly transition into that. As Giffin said, it's about where, but we can also imagine tons of cases, as Giffin mentioned, where like the transition's pretty quick. I mean, the relevant facts are at hand, where you just kind of like, and I really did take a lot of precautions with this.
Like this is on you.
I went like above and beyond what was necessary, and the indignant asshole comes around the corner, like immediate.
just smashes us up.
Giffin just keeps pushing the machine further. He's like just running it right over them.
Turns back. There's nothing to agent regret. The guy's just like he's like writhing in pain. Yeah. There was something that I was curious to hear what you guys thought, like experientially speaking. But
was it about expression and how that relates to agent regret?
Is that something you want to, if you want to talk about something, go ahead.
I thought that's what came to my mind, because on the bottom of 27, it says, or he writes, agent regret requires not merely a first personal subject matter, nor yet merely a particular kind of psychological content, but also a particular kind of expression. And I didn't know if that's what you meant, that like you were transitioning into, because that like the particular kind of expression was something that like wasn't as intuitive to me.
Can you read that quote again?
Yeah. Agent regret requires not merely a first personal subject matter, nor yet merely a particular kind of psychological content, but also a particular kind of expression.
That seems wrong.
That's why I made a note there, and I thought that's what you're actually transitioning to right now.
Oh, no, I wasn't, but that seems wrong.
Particular kind of expression, like especially like granting that as different like from psychological content does seem wrong.
Yeah, because that just seems so dependent on like the intricacies of the situation, right? Like how you express, like I don't know, like you could be like not able to express yourself in certain ways because of like legal concerns or whatever. Or
it just seems
doesn't he go on to say that like there's like a desire like kind of make reparations if one feels like agent regret to, you know what I mean? So like even like to oneself, like, like an egoistic example maybe, where it's like, one could vow to change perhaps one's procedure in the future, or one had to be to oneself, and one will maybe like I guess modify behavior, or like if it's towards someone else, you're trying to like rectify the situation somehow, so that you were kind of at the root cause of why something occurred. I don't know. That could come into like the expression part of it there.
Yeah, maybe what he's saying is that aspect happens to show up most in expression. It's sort of like what you actually, express regret over, like what you do in some sense. It doesn't seem to logically follow. It just seems to sort of like inferentially follow.
Right, which is kind of strange because in the same kind of sentence he mentions psychological content, which is that seems like outside of our knowledge. Think about others.
What you like intend to do in the aftermath or something. Yeah.
Because I'm just like wondering, like with like the expression part of it, it's like, okay, barring the idea that you're like prevented from making reparations, like in like a legal context or something like that, is there a circumstance in which you genuinely feel agent regret, but make no attempt to act upon that?
Yes, but it's not actually like, it has nothing to do with any of the details intrinsic to what you're talking about. It's always for like external concerns, right? So like I'm imagining like you can't apologize to someone because it wouldn't incriminate you legally or something like that, right? So it's not in.
But even that almost seems like it's kind of like there's some sort of external force that's like barring from doing that. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. Yes.
Like barring that, like
okay. So barring that.
Because I feel like to some degree, like your behavior will be modified, or you will act on agent regret to some extent. If you feel genuine agent regret, I feel like that's something you will express in behavior or in mindset.
Well, mindset is a different thing he distinguishes between, right? He says like not just psychological content, but expression.
Because I guess to like kind of buttress Giffin's point a little bit, like I guess you could sort of feel it, like the impulse to do it, but never act on it, right? Just for sort of maybe like sloth or or like maybe it's just like it just seems awkward to kind of like.
What if you determine that the reparations actually isn't the most moral path?
Yeah, that too. Like, but then it seems like it's content, like that's almost changing like the details. Do you know what I mean? Like it would just your reparations would show up in a different way, right?
I mean,
it could be like I would give you $500 to compensate you, but I'm going to give it to this other cause that needs it more. So like it it wouldn't really inform the expression in that case, right?
I mean, it would. It would though, right?
I mean, the $500 is going to completely irrelevant to like the
so it's not
experiencing regret for, right?
Yeah, so that wouldn't be like, that'd be odd. Like if I like dented your car, in a way that was like completely my fault, like I was just being an idiot,
agent regret,
but then and like you were like the damages are $500, and then I just gave that $500 to a charity. I'm not sure that would be like agent regret. For like,
I guess this would be a case where like if you have just like really high certainty that like the $500 giving it to that person isn't the best use for it. So maybe not giving it to like some random charity, but hey, my mom needs this $500 or she's gonna die or something like that, right? So that would be a case where like,
but that seems completely independent of like the smashing of the car. Like
that's what I mean though, because he's claiming that like the expression is what matters, but I'm giving a case where like it wouldn't actually be expressed.
But it's not that the potential for expression isn't there. It's that it's overridden. I'm presuming, right? It's that it's overridden by like this other thing.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think the potential for expression is like this. Sounds to me at least intuitively as like psychological content, right? Like your mindset has been shifted, but this is separate from that. This is supposed to be a particular kind of expression specifically. So I guess I'm imagining a case where like you get the agent regret and it's manifesting psychologically, but just like it's not, you're not getting that physical expression, like the behavioral stuff, for good reason. I don't know if that's
but it would have.
I see it. It's kind of whack though. I mean, you like
it's contrived for sure.
No. I mean, but I think like it makes sense. It's just like seeing it manifest would be really weird. Where it's like, like I crash into your car. Like I like this deep sense of agent regret, where like I recognize that like I was like at the root of the cause of the destruction of your car. and at the same time, like I wish things had been different. I wish my own behavior had been different.
Yeah.
So agent regret.
I wish I had acted differently. You know, and perhaps I was, you know, a little drunk while driving.
A little.
You know, like I don't. There isn't justification. I recognize that there isn't justification for what happened.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like perhaps I just like don't act on that. Like I just like, and like in this case, like I don't apologize. Like I don't, but perhaps like I just like, you know, just live my life as before. Without
no, I mean,
sort of expression.
So again, psychological content could be altered. It's just the expression that's like needs to be, you know, not there.
That's what I mean. Like I'm.
I mean, live your life the same way. I feel like you're not really psychologically absorbing that.
Well, then okay, but then if you're saying you're living your life a different way, then I think you're expressing that. Then, right?
I don't know. I think it's supposed to be in relation to like the situation specifically, not like you go off.
I feel like you're proving the point, but that there must be some sort of expression. Like if you're saying that, like,
unless you're constrained from an external reason that has nothing to do with it, right?
Yeah, because you're saying you're saying okay, these things necessarily don't go hand in hand, and I'm saying okay, you can kind of imagine where you've been psychologically changed by this. Yeah. But you don't, you know, express it in any different way if you live your life as you had before. But you're saying no. You must, because the psychological content has changed. And I'm like, okay,
I see what you're saying.
Hand in hand.
Whenever he's saying differences in expression, I thought it was referencing not like just like, you know, a different track of like life in general. I thought it meant like with respect to the situation. Like, you know, you're expressing it as in like a willingness to compensate the person. Like that would be an expression of like agent regret in this particular scenario, right?
It'd be a type of expression.
Okay. I thought that was kind of like, I think I was considering a much stricter definition of expression he was imagining, which is why I was a little bit not really a fan of it. But if expression means like is distinguishable, like you know, from I guess that makes sense. Like you can imagine a scenario where like, you know, the agent regret feeling that is different from not sometime in the future in behavior broadly. Yeah.
I think I understand the distinction he's making now. Where it's if this isn't merely like a, you know, a psychological issue, like this does manifest behavior to some extent. So
at least, I mean, it's got to be at least like the vast majority of time in practice, right? So like, I don't know, even if we can find exceptions, when we're thinking about this in like real life cases, it probably, maybe not. I don't know if you don't want to say it has to, like it definitely does most of the time.
Yeah, because like whenever we kind of stated it out loud, what it would look like without
it's very strange.
It sounded pretty contrived. So
it was extremely contrived.
Like, so
no, I agree.
Like that person doesn't exist in reality.
Yeah, that's a strange bird. who doesn't do that? I think that I am at the maximum useful output. I don't know about you guys, but
yeah, I think this is a good
I agree. Yeah, no,
we discussed some of the interesting parts of the paper.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. This was also kind of we haven't done one of these papers in a while where it's just like a very interesting concept, a very simple concept that you know kind of like spawns a lot of like interesting discussion in the paper. I like this. I like this.
It was kind of fun actually. It was
I agree.
No, the content it was great, but I think he should feel some degree of agent regret, I think, for the way he wrote it.
Oh yeah, no, he is doing himself no favors with the which is so weird actually, because like the only other paper that I've actually read from Williams is that paper that I reference all the time to you guys with George the chemist and the person who has to kill one of the natives to like save. I read it in my undergrad class that I loved, and I don't remember that writing being bad at all. So I don't know. This
was just an off year, like a Coke year or something. It was the 80s, right?
Coke year.
No, like honestly, like I would read a sentence and then I would read the next sentence and I would be like, hold on a minute. And then I had to go back and read the first sentence. And I'm like, hold on a minute.
Some
and then I had to go back one more sentence.
They had like 8 clauses in them, and I'm like, oh,
it was very poorly written.
Please, yeah.
Here's the sentence that actually it makes complete sense now, and it might sound stupid when I read it out loud because it might be just, oh, that's obvious. But I swear to God, I read this thing like 6 times. I was just like, I hated the construction of this sentence. But Anna remains conscious in her life with Vronsky of the cost exacted from others, above all from her son. and I was just like,
what?
I was like, Anna remains conscious in her life with Vronsky of the cost exacted from others, above all from her son. And I'm like, Anna remains conscious in her life with Vronsky. I'm like,
no, okay. Gun to my head, I'm not sure what I would say that sentence means.
But then I was like, I paused like in the reading of it where it's like, Anna remains conscious in her life with Vronsky of the cost exacted from others above all her son. And I was just like, but there's no commas in that. So it just like, Anna remains conscious of her life with Vronsky. Like she remains conscious of her life with Vronsky. I'm like, I hate this.
That's hilarious. It's just so.
Yeah, no, I struggled with the reading, but the concepts I thought were very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
like I know we've only read this one thing from Williams, but I think I told you guys, right? Wolf's advisors were Williams and Nagel, which is okay. Like first of all, like amazing, but her writing resembles Nagel's much more, in my opinion. At least,
like I said, I gained an appreciation for Wolf after reading this. So, yeah. You kind of take it for granted after reading 6 Wolf papers that like it's actually very fluid.
It's like some of the most
I don't really have
the
same kind of questions reading between sentences or within clauses of a sentence at all in her work.
Yeah, no, I get like having like, delved back into just like reading a ton of philosophy every week. I like really stretches my patience for doing like exegesis on text. Like I don't like, just tell me what you mean. Like just tell me like what, you know what I mean? I don't know. It's
that was my problem with Williams too with this one. Like, sorry, but I after reading Wolf, I'm just like, I'm not convinced this needed to be 20 pages long.
No,
like, that too.
Like
he jumps around.
It's 20 pages long, and it's kind of like, we've read really, really good philosophy papers that are like 10.
Yes.
So it's like I just don't. I'm not convinced that a good paper needs to be 20 pages long.
No, actually, I know.
You needed an editor, to be honest.
It doesn't need to be.
Yeah.
No, and did I tell you guys also about how like so for some of my classes, we have like just purely like exegetical responses. So like, okay, read this 20-page paper, but summarize it in a way as though you were presenting it. To then kind of like find fault with it or something, like the relevant core aspects of it. And, you can do that in like 2 pages, right? If it's like a pretty complicated article. And like, okay, that's a good skill. But then also for this Rice class, where the paper that's due on Sunday for that is 1,500 words, which is about like 5 pages double. Like it's not much. Like it's really not much to make a substantive point. And that's the point, is that it's like a full paper in that length. And it's like, and I was like, this is impossible. But then as soon as you constrain yourself to it, it's like, oh no, it's actually quite possible. You just have to, you leave out a lot, which is, but when you write a paper very briefly and then allow yourself to blow it up a little bit, I feel like you can end up with a way shorter paper than if you just, I don't have a page limit and just start writing.
Yeah, that's what I get the impression of here. Is like, you know what? I'm going to put out a paper this year. And then he just starts writing.
And it was good. I do want
to.
No,
it was.
I enjoyed this paper, but it was,
But I enjoyed the content of the paper. I'll admit to that.
Yes, I did. This is one of those papers where honestly, there's not many papers I would recommend reading like this. But I would almost recommend like, okay, commit to reading it twice, but read it twice fast both times almost.
totally agree with that.
Don't get lost in like the Eric Karenina example.
Yeah, like don't actually
clause
worry.
4 of 5.
It's so weird because like I'm not like this with any other paper, because if you're reading something you don't get it, you're like, well, okay, this is going to come up later. So like you dig back, like you just reread it. You know what I mean? Like, okay, like what was I missing here? Whatever. This one you kind of don't need it. But like, you know, it's not bad.
It really helps with papers like this, and I often experience this like when reading like scientific papers too. Just keep reading. You just keep reading, because like by the time you like reach like different conclusions, like those are kind of like I don't know, those stand out, so that when you read through again, it's like, oh, okay, I know what the goals of are. You know what I mean? You're able to kind of just everything comes much more clearly a second time through, because you know
the role of sentences will become much clearer once you get the full picture.
Yes. Exactly.
No, it's true. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah,
it's true. Okay, well, I don't know what next week's reading is actually, but I'm looking forward to it again, because it should be a single paper again next time. So I hope people are enjoying this, and if so, I hope people tune in next time. If you want to support the show in any way, you can do so simply by sharing it. I'm hoping to get this show out to more people, and so if you want to share it on Twitter or social media, that would really help me. You can also rate it on Apple Podcasts, like this video if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe via Apple Podcasts or an RSS feed, or you can connect me with recommended guests or topics to cover. You can get in contact with me at platoscavepodcast@gmail.com. Follow me on Twitter at Jordan_C_Myers. And I now have a website for my philosophy endeavors at jordanmyers.org. If you want to know a little bit more about me and my fellow co-hosts, I'm a master's student in philosophy at the University of Houston. I did my undergrad at the University of Pittsburgh, where I studied mechanical engineering and philosophy. And now that I'm back at school, I'm hoping to more closely study moral responsibility, free will, ethics, epistemology, and moral psychology. Those are topics that I was introduced to and got really interested in my undergrad work. Adam and Giffin accompanied me on this show, and Adam is one of my oldest friends. We actually met in kindergarten, and we've been interested in philosophical topics for as long as we can remember, and in a lot of ways, it's been the basis of our friendship. Adam studied chemistry and biology at Cornell, and he's especially interested in moral responsibility as well, but also law, religion, and free will. Giffin is also one of my oldest friends. We've been friends since elementary school as well. Giffin studied biology and economics at RPI, and now he works in human health research. And he's particularly interested in exploring political philosophy. With all of that information, again, I hope that you enjoyed this episode, and I hope that you get in contact with me or follow my work in any way that you deem reasonable to do. So with that, thank you for listening.